Okay, this morning we want to look at example-based learning, prayer. Now, one of the most effective ways of learning something new, a new skill, is through example-based learning. Earlier this week, I was speaking to a student of mine, and he inspired me about this. He was doing a degree in maritime studies. I knew he was doing it a few years ago, and I asked him, so what did we know? We are captain on a ship? Or something like that. He said, no, I dropped out. I said, why? He said, well, after doing 2 years of the degree, he had never been on a ship. Everything was theoretical, and it wasn't making any sense because they never had any practical experience aboard any vessel. So he realized that that didn't make sense. He couldn't go on a boat to navigate because he hadn't had that practical experience. Example-based learning is especially important whenever students have to learn something that involves technical abilities, and it is used in 4 main areas: medicine, engineering, the aviation industry, and in the maritime industry. One cannot let a doctor or a surgeon learn from books and say, okay, go and operate on a patient, because that student must have observed and learned from example. And you know what they have discovered with example-based learning, educational psychologists, is that the better skilled the teacher and the more experienced the teacher, the better the students learn. And it makes sense. We don't have to research to find out that. Now, example-based learning, I want to apply it to our prayer life today. And we have an example of somebody who prayed, and I think that that person is the best example that we could learn from in terms of praying. And that person is Jesus Christ, or Yeshua, as some people would say. And in the Bible, we have recorded many prayers that Christ said, and we could learn how to pray from him, because he would be the best teacher of this skill for us. So let's look at, God took 5 points. You could do a study on your own, and I am sure you will get much more points than these 5 points. But knowing that Mr. Smith is always looking at his watch, I only took 5 points. 1. He prayed for a substantial period of time before making major decisions. Let's go and look at this example in Luke chapter 6, verses 12 to 13. And my notes and my references will be from the New King James Version. Now it came to pass in those days that he went out to the mountain to pray, and continued all night in prayer. And when it was day, he called his disciples to himself, and from them he chose 12, whom he also named apostles. So the selection of the apostles was a major decision that Christ had to make. And before he made that decision, you know what he did? He prayed for an entire night. I have never prayed for an entire night, or half a night, or quarter of a night before making a decision. And I think this is an example that we could all learn from. Sometimes we pray and ask God to guide us in making a decision, and we go ahead and make the decision. But prayer showed us that we ought to spend a substantial period of time praying before we make that decision. He spent a night praying, and then he chose his apostles. Second point, he often withdrew to find a place of solitude in order to pray. We have a few examples of this. Mark 1, verse 55. Now, in the morning, having risen a long while before daylight, 4 o'clock in the morning, probably 3 o'clock, he went out and departed to a solitary place, and there he prayed. So he made an effort to wake earlier than everybody else. And in those days, he couldn't have taken a bus or a train or a taxi. He had to walk. So he had to make that sacrifice to wake up earlier to find that solitary place. Let's go to Luke 5 and verse 16. And it talks about his practice, that he practiced this. So he himself often withdrew into the wilderness and prayed. And this point is further elaborated in Matthew 14, verse 23. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up on a mountain by himself to pray. Now when evening came, he was alone there. So this example is that when we need to engage in prayer, deep prayer, we need to find a place of solitude. Now I'm not telling you to go up on any mountain to pray. It might be unsafe now. But we may need to find a private place or time when we wouldn't have unwanted distractions, when we know nobody would call on the phone, when we wouldn't be expecting somebody to message us. We need that time of unwanted distraction, where we have no unwanted distractions, so that we can engage in intimate and deep prayer. Because with distractions, we can't focus on the prayer the communication that we have with God, and the communication with the broken. So this example is one for us to follow, for us to learn from. Let's find a place of solitude, or time of solitude to pray to God. Third point, at times he prayed with deep emotions. And I am sure that we would have prayed with deep emotions when we are going through certain trials and tribulations. Luke chapter 22 and verse 44 tells us, and being in agony, he prayed more earnestly. Then his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. So it means that it was really a fervent prayer, that he was sweating so profusely that the sweat dropped heavily on the ground. So at times there may be need for us to pray with deep emotions. Fourth point, he prayed more than once on the same issue in one night. And in reading this, I had to think about it, about myself. Sometimes you pray on an issue, you put it before God once and expect God will answer your prayer, or whatever answer you get, you think that that is the result. But in reading this, I realized that he prayed more than once on the same issue in one night. And this is recorded in Matthew 26, verses 42 to 44. Again, a second time, he went away and prayed, saying, "O my Father, if this cup cannot pass away from me unless I drink it, your will be done." And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. So he left them, went away again, and prayed the third time, saying the same words. So therefore, it shows us that sometimes we can petition God more than once on an issue. There may be a point when we would have to stop petitioning him if he doesn't answer us. But from Christ's example, we realize that he prayed the same prayer 3 times, as is recorded in the scripture. And the final point, he offered short public prayers as the situation warranted. And I have a couple examples of these. John 11:41-42. And this is when he resurrected Lazarus from after he had passed away. Beginning in verse 41. Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead man was lying. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me, and I know that you always hear me. But because of the people who are standing by, I said this, that they may believe that you sent me. So he uttered a short prayer to God as he was about to perform the resurrection of Lazarus. As he was about to die physically, he prayed for the forgiveness of those who were crucified with him. Luke 23:46 records that short prayer. Luke 23:34, sorry. Then Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. Simple, short, 10 words. And before he died, Luke 23:46 records another short prayer. 7 words. And when Jesus had cried out with a loud voice, he said, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Having said this, he breathed his last. So at times, we may be faced with certain situations in public, and we may have to say a short prayer to God. Yes, that is an example that Jesus said. It might be at the start of a journey to go home this afternoon, before an examination. What about speaking to the boss, approaching the boss, especially if you have a hostile boss? So at times, in public, we may need to say a short prayer. So as I close, remember that Jesus is the best and perfect example for us in terms of praying. And I only got 5 points. We could go and look at all the other prayers and gather from it how we should be praying. And from that example, we will be following the best ever instructor in prayer. So I will just recap the points. 1, he prayed for a substantial period of time before making major decisions. Remember, he prayed for the whole night before appointing the apostles. 2, he often withdrew to actively find a place of solitude in order to pray. We should actively be doing that, especially if we want to have deep communication with God. At least once a day, find a time and place where we can have that solitude for uninterrupted communication. 3, at times he prayed with deep emotions. 4, he prayed more than once on the same issue in one night. Remember, he prayed the same prayer 3 times. And finally, he offered short public prayers as the situation warranted. So in public, he didn't go off on a monologue for 1 or 2 hours. As the situation warranted, he offered short short public prayers. Brethren, let's learn from the best teacher about praying.